the space between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. At first, it's terrifying. Because the mask doesn't just cover the ego, it is the ego. It feels like you. And when it begins to fade, you're not left with a new identity. You're left with emptiness. But that emptiness isn't absence. It's presence, unfiltered, unfamiliar, and free. Let's slow down. Let's peel back the layers. Your name, your job, your gender, your beliefs, your story, all of it. Symbols stitched together to form a you. But none of them are real in the way you think they are. They're useful. They help the world navigate around you. They help your memory build continuity. They give the ego something to cling to. But the soul? The soul isn't impressed by roles. The soul waits patiently, silently, beneath every label, every narrative, every desperate attempt to be someone. Because here's the secret. Who you think you are is not who you are. You've been living inside a container, a carefully curated self-image, reinforced by family, culture, fear, and expectation. It's not fake. It's just incomplete. And when that container begins to crack, something ancient moves through the gaps. Stillness, silence, an awareness untouched by identity. This is what the mystics called ego death, not the destruction of the self, but the soft dissolving of the illusion that you are the self. It feels like losing your center, but it's actually finding what was beneath the center all along. Let's look more closely. Imagine waking up tomorrow with no memory. You don't know your name. You don't know your story. You don't know your preferences or plans. And yet, you're still here. Alive, aware, present. So who are you? That question doesn't lead to an answer. It leads to silence. And in that silence, a deeper knowing arises, one that doesn't need definition to exist. That's the moment when the mask begins to melt. You stop clinging to image. You stop grasping for control. You stop narrating every experience through the lens of me. And in that stopping, you begin seeing, without the distortion, without the need to defend, without the story. It's like walking through a familiar house and realizing you never noticed the windows. You've been so focused on the furniture of identity that you forgot to look outside the frame. And what's outside? Space, stillness, infinity, wearing no face. The more the mask melts, the more you feel this paradox. You're not disappearing. You're expanding. You're not becoming no one. You're becoming everyone. Because when the false center dissolves, you remember something your soul never forgot. You were never the mask. You were the space it floated in. Let's return to the moment where the mask begins to fade, not in panic, but in peace. At first, the ego doesn't understand. It trembles at the edges like an actor who's forgotten their lines. If I am not this identity, who will love me? If I drop the mask, what if I vanish? These are not trivial questions. They are the cries of a mind trained to survive by performance. But here's the paradox. What you're losing was never you. What you're gaining was always there. We've spent lifetimes trying to become something, when the truth is we were never anything to begin with. Not because we're empty, but because we're whole. The mind believes identity is stability, but identity is often just a wall between you and reality. Every label, every opinion, every story about yourself, it filters the world. It shields you from the rawness of direct experience. But what happens when the filter dissolves? Suddenly, life is vivid again. Not because anything changed, but because you're finally seeing it as it is. No narrative, no agenda, just this: the wind, the breath, the ache in your chest, all part of the same unfiltered now. This is what awakening tastes like. Not fireworks, not visions, just a subtle remembering that you don't need to be anything to be. But don't be fooled, this isn't the end of suffering. In fact, when the mask melts, what often surfaces first is grief. Grief for all the years you lived as someone else. Grief for the armor you mistook for skin. Grief for the lost time, the false battles, the self you tried so hard to sustain. Let yourself mourn. Let yourself cry. Not because something is wrong, but because something is true. You're not losing yourself. You're shedding the illusion that you had to construct one. And beneath that illusion, there's something gentle, soft, unshakable. Call it soul. Call it presence. Call it the deep I am that needs no story to exist. It has no name. It has no history. But it is more you than anything you've ever claimed. Let's pause here. Can you feel it? The subtle shift from person to presence, from role to reality. It's not something you do. It's something you allow. When you stop trying to be someone, being reveals itself, effortlessly. The great traditions knew this. In Zen, it's called no mind. In Sufism, fana, the annihilation of the self in God. In the Christian mystic path, kenosis, the emptying of the self. Each tradition speaks of it differently, but the experience is universal. There is a peace that arises only when you let go of needing to be anyone at all. And in that peace, you don't become passive. You don't become detached. You become transparent. You become like clear water. Everything passes through. Nothing sticks. There is no one to offend, no one to defend, no one to impress. Because you've seen through the illusion that you were ever the mask. This doesn't mean the personality disappears. It means you stop mistaking the personality for the person. You can still play the role. You can still use your name. You can still enjoy the dance of form. But the grip is gone. The tension of selfing, the effort to hold yourself together, it begins to dissolve. And what replaces it? Ease, clarity, compassion. You become deeply human, not because you cling to identity, but because you no longer need to. The most loving people are not the ones who know who they are, but the ones who no longer need to be anyone in particular. They move like wind. They listen like silence. They act without trying to prove. This is the path of melting the mask, not to disappear, but to become real. And reality doesn't need a face. There's a strange freedom in not knowing who you are. It sounds like a loss, like identity slipping through your fingers, but it's not loss. It's release. Because knowing who you are has always come at a cost. You had to keep proving it, defending it, refining it, and behind all of that, a quiet fear. What if I'm not enough? What if this mask slips and they see what's underneath? But here's the revelation no one told you. What's underneath doesn't need to be enough. It just is. And that's the miracle. We've built entire lives on top of identity. We've said, I'm the smart one. I'm the broken one. I'm the fighter. I'm the achiever. And yet, when the noise quiets, none of these survive. They're characters in a play we've mistaken for reality. But consciousness? Presence? That doesn't play a role. It watches. It waits. It is. Let's look again at what identity truly is. At its core, identity is repetition, a pattern. It's a loop of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that stabilize over time. And while these patterns can be helpful, they become prisons when we believe that's all we are. If you've always been the one who fixes everything, then the moment you break, shame floods in. If you've always been the strong one, then softness feels like weakness. But if there's no identity to uphold, there's nothing to break. You are free to cry, free to pause, free to not know. Because awareness holds it all, without judgment. This is the heart of true liberation. You stop being someone trying to hold it together, and you become the space where everything is allowed to fall apart, not in chaos, but in surrender. And surrender is not the same as giving up. It's giving in to life as it is. It's unhooking from the identity machine long enough to hear the silence beneath the static. And that silence speaks, not in words, but in a quiet intuition, a knowing without a knower. When the mask melts, this intuition becomes your compass. You no longer need to construct a self. You allow reality to move through you. You become a vessel, an instrument, a passage through which presence sings. And suddenly, everything changes. Relationships deepen, because you're not performing. You're not defending a role. You're not filtering everything through me. You're listening. You're being with. And people feel it. They may not know why, but they soften in your presence, because presence recognizes itself. Even your inner world shifts. Old wounds arise, but they don't define you. You feel them fully and let them pass, because there's no self left to protect from pain. This is not numbness. This is not detachment. It's intimacy, so raw, so open, that it no longer needs protection. You realize, this anger isn't me, it's an energy passing through. This fear isn't my identity, it's just part of being human. And in that recognition, you stop clinging. The storm comes, and you don't become the storm. You stay rooted as the sky, still, unshaken, endlessly spacious. And here's the beautiful paradox. The less you cling to being someone, the more naturally your gifts emerge. Not because you're trying, but because there's nothing in the way. Creativity flows, compassion arises, wisdom surfaces, not as ideas but as direct knowing. You become a mirror, a river, a field of presence, and this presence begins to live your life, not as a distant concept, but as a felt reality, in every moment, in every interaction, in every breath. And you begin to notice something strange. The world starts reflecting this spaciousness back to you. Conversations deepen, time slows, synchronicities unfold, and your very existence begins to feel like a kind of meditation, not because you've escaped the world, but because you've stopped resisting it. You no longer need to be the thinker of your thoughts. You no longer need to be the one doing your life. You simply are, and life flows through you. This is the way of the unmasked. It is not a philosophy. It is a lived experience, subtle, sacred, and profoundly human. You become the dance, not the dancer, the wind, not the flag, the silence, not the story. And in this you rediscover what was never truly lost, the self that is no self, the peace that doesn't depend on anything, the you that existed before the mask was ever worn. And so the question lingers. What happens when identity fades? You do not become less. You become lighter, not hollow, but open, not lost, but boundaryless, not erased, but revealed. When the need to be someone dissolves, and so the question lingers. What happens when identity fades? What's left is not nothingness, it's everythingness. A vast, ungraspable intimacy with life itself. You walk through the world not as a concept, but as a living presence, raw, aware, unfiltered. This is not detachment. This is not spiritual bypass. This is the full embrace of being without needing to be. It's allowing life to move through you, grief, joy, anger, delight, without clinging to any of it as mine. Because when you stop claiming experience, experience reveals itself in full color. The tree is greener, the breath is deeper, the silence is not empty, it's alive. You begin to sense something underneath it all, a quiet intelligence. A still aware presence in which everything arises and dissolves. And this presence is not separate from you, it is you. Not your mind, not your personality, but the deeper you, the one who never left, the one who was never born, the one who doesn't need a name to exist. This is the mystery behind the mask. And once you glimpse it, you realize the mask never truly hid it. It simply pointed toward what was waiting underneath. You don't need to destroy the ego. You just need to see through it. The ego was never your enemy. It was a strategy, a survival tool, a scaffold for growing into the human experience. But now the structure can loosen, the scaffolding can fall away, and in its place, a quiet spaciousness, not dramatic, not transcendent in the way you expected, but so intimate, it's almost unnoticeable. It feels like breathing for the first time, like remembering something you never knew you forgot, like meeting yourself, not as a role, but as presence itself. From this space, life becomes fluid. You don't know what you'll say next. You don't know who you'll become. And that not knowing is no longer scary. It's sacred. It means the old script has ended. And now, you get to listen. Listen to what wants to move through you, what wants to be created, what wants to be felt, lived, expressed, not as you, but through you. And when this happens, you begin to live in alignment with what some call soul. Not the soul as a thing, but soul as a movement. a silent current of beingness flowing beneath all form. In this current, you are not the author of your life. You are the page it's written on. You are not the voice. You are the echo that gives the voice its depth. And this changes everything. You stop trying to find yourself. You stop trying to define yourself. Because you've realized you are not something to be found. You are something to be remembered, felt, allowed. And this remembering is not an act of the mind. It is a falling back into being, like slipping beneath the waves and discovering that you were always the ocean. So now, let the mask go, not with anger, not with force, but with reverence. Thank it for how it served you, how it carried you through the world when you didn't yet know how to be seen. Then watch as it dissolves, not into darkness, but into light. Because beneath every mask is the face of God, and that face is not separate from yours. It's not something you find. It's what remains when all else falls away. So breathe, let go, melt, and return to the self you never had to create. The self that was always here, waiting to be remembered. Next time on the Beyond the Self series, we explore the silent knower, beyond thought, beyond name. Until then, stay curious, stay conscious. If this stirred something inside you, subscribe, like, and share this with a fellow seeker.